You ever notice how the words, "Can I borrow just a little," always come wrapped in the exact same tone, half pleading, half entitled, like you already said yes before you even opened your mouth? I used to think it was just me. Maybe I had that kind of face, the kind that says, "I won't say no." But by the time I hit 25, I realized it wasn't my face. It was my wallet. And my reputation for saving like a squirrel preparing for an acorn apocalypse. Back then, I wasn't rich. I wasn't even particularly ambitious. I just didn't spend every dime that touched my hand. While my friends were blowing paychecks on car mods, bar tabs, and whatever CD player had the most flashing lights, I was quietly filling a savings account that looked, by comparison, mythical. People whispered about it the way medieval villagers whispered about dragons. "Did you hear? Mark's got $5 grand just sitting there." $5 grand? Yeah. He says it's for the future. The future? What, like retirement? Who does that? Apparently, I did. Which, in hindsight, was my first mistake. The first person to hit me up was my college roommate, Dave. He was the kind of guy who wore the same lucky baseball cap to every exam and believed ramen noodles were a food group. One afternoon he cornered me in our dorm kitchen, eyes wide, voice full of tragedy. "Bro, my car's dead. Completely dead. I need a tow, and the guy won't come unless I pay up front." "How much?" I asked. Rookie mistake. Never ask how much until you're ready to be disappointed. "Only 100, he said, like it was nothing. "I'll pay you back next week, swear on my mom." I liked his mom. She used to send us cookies. So I gave him the 100. And, of course, I never saw it again. But I did get a free tow next semester, when my car broke down and Dave happened to drive by. He waved. With both hands. After Dave came my cousin Lisa. She had the kind of smile that could sell ice to Eskimos, or guilt to relatives. She called me "cuz," which I now realize was code for potential donor. "Cuz, I'm in a jam. My landlord's being a total jerk. If I don't pay rent today, he's kicking me out." "How much?" I asked again, still naive. 300. I hesitated, and she turned on the tears. Not full crying, just the glossy eye performance. Oscar-worthy. So I transferred her the money. A month later I visited her apartment to drop off something my aunt had mailed. The door was open, music blasting, lights flashing. A housewarming party. "Lisa," I said. "You didn't tell me you moved." She grinned. "Oh, no, I stayed. Landlord was bluffing." I looked around at the beer cans and the new flat screen. "Nice TV," I said. "Thanks. It was on sale, only 300. I should have walked out right then, but instead I laughed. Because what else can you do when your money has better adventures than you do? Once word spread that I was a soft touch, it was open season. Friends, co-workers, even my barber, everybody suddenly had temporary money issues. My phone turned into a hotline for financial emergencies that mysteriously aligned with concert tickets, vacation deposits, and overdue tabs at Murphy's Pub. "Come on, Mark, you know I'll pay you back." "Dude, you make good money. It's just until payday. You're a lifesaver." The phrases blended together until they felt scripted. I was the audience, applauding with my debit card. At first, I rationalized it. They'll learn. They're struggling. I'm helping. But deep down I knew what was happening. I'd become everyone's emergency fund, and not the kind you pay interest to. The real turning point came at my friend Kevin's birthday party. We were sitting around his backyard fire pit, beers in hand, talking about life. Out of nowhere, his girlfriend, tipsy and honest, laughed and said, "Kevin calls you the Bank of Mark." Everyone chuckled. I didn't. "The Bank of Mark?" I repeated. "Yeah," Kevin said, cheeks red. You know, 'cause you always come through. No fees, easy approval. He thought it was hilarious. I smiled on the outside, but inside, something snapped. I realized I was the punchline. The dependable fool financing everyone's hard times. That night I drove home, sat in the dark living room, and made a decision. The Bank of Mark was closing, effective immediately. Problem was, closing a bank isn't as easy as flipping a sign. You can't just tell people no after years of sure, I got you. They'd smell the resistance and double down with sob stories. I needed camouflage. That's when genius, or maybe pure pettiness, struck. If they thought I was broke, they wouldn't ask. So I opened a new account at a small local credit union. Minimum balance required? $20. Perfect. I deposited exactly 20 in savings, plus just enough in checking to cover my monthly bills. Then, whenever I got paid, I'd move everything else into separate savings and investment accounts at a different bank. The Decoy account looked pathetic, like a wallet after tax day. I even practiced my line in the mirror, sorry, man. I'd love to help, but money's tight right now. Add a sigh. Look away, humble but resigned. Perfect. My first test subject, my coworker Jenna. She was infamous for borrowing lunch money and repaying with exposure. One Friday she cornered me at the vending machine. Hey, Mark, could you spot me 20 for gas? My paycheck's delayed. Ah, Jenna, I said, lowering my voice. Wish I could, but things are rough this month. I pulled up my banking app and showed her the glorious sight, checking balance, $4.27, her eyes widened. Oh, wow. Sorry, I didn't realize. It's okay, I said, martyr style. We all struggle sometimes. She walked away, visibly uncomfortable. I almost laughed out loud. The plan worked. It was beautiful, poetic even. For once, I wasn't the villain for saying no, I was the tragic hero of my own fake misfortune. The next few months were blissful. Fewer calls, fewer guilt trips. But then came my mom. Mothers, unfortunately, have built-in lie detectors. Are you eating enough? She asked over Sunday dinner. Sure, Mom. You look thinner. Money trouble? Yeah, something like that. She gasped, grabbed my hand. Why didn't you say something? You know your father and I can help. That's when I realized my plan had an unforeseen flaw, it worked too well. I had to convince my mother not to loan me money. Which, ironically, was the first time I'd ever been offered help without asking. Mom, it's fine. Just temporary. She nodded, eyes misty. My baby boy, finally learning humility. I nodded too, silently promising to add, explain fake poverty to Mom, to my to-do list. By year 2, broke Mark had become its own mythology. People swapped stories about how I'd lost my savings on a bad investment, or how I'd developed a crippling beer habit. I didn't correct them. It was easier to let them believe I'd joined the ranks of the financially reckless. The same folks who once shamed me for being too careful, now pitted me for being too wild. I'd gone from ATM to cautionary tale, and honestly, it was kind of liberating. The lies got funnier over time. When someone asked where all my money went, I'd shrug. Beer, I'd say. Really? Yeah, and the strip club. Those cover fees are brutal. They always nodded, satisfied. People believe the stories that make them comfortable. If I'd said stocks or real estate, they'd have envied me again. But beer and bad decisions? That they could understand. For a while, life was quiet. My finances grew in secret. I took up hobbies that didn't require anyone's approval, gardening, reading, a little weekend travel. And when friends invited me to expensive outings, I had the perfect out, can't, man. Budgets tight. They never pushed. It was bliss. Every now and then I'd open my real accounts, watch the numbers climb, and whisper, "Who's broke now?" It became a private ritual, a silent victory lap for my newfound peace. But as with all great lies, the universe has a sense of humor. And mine was about to come collecting. My sister, always the nosy one, decided to host a family reunion. She loved playing detective with everyone's lives, who's dating who bought what. I knew I'd have to brace myself for the usual interrogation. "So, Mark," she said over barbecue and sweet tea, "you still working that same job?" "Yup." "And still broke?" she teased, laughing. "Yup," I said, smiling back. "Same as ever." She shook her head, mock sympathy oozing. "You should be more responsible. You're not getting any younger." I bit back a laugh. If only she knew that my irresponsibility was sitting quietly in a high-yield savings account, earning 4.8% interest. But hey, why ruin the illusion? Driving home that night, I realized something strange. For the first time in my adult life, I was content. Nobody asked me for money, nobody judged me for saving, and nobody looked at me like a walking solution to their poor decisions. Sure, I was technically lying, but I was also finally living on my own terms. Still, a small part of me wondered, had I gone too far? Maybe. But after years of being treated like a piggy bank, I figured a little poetic justice was fair interest. Besides, what's the harm in being strategically broke? If anyone ever tells you lying is stressful, they've clearly never tried strategic honesty. That's what I called it, strategic honesty. I didn't lie outright, I just edited the truth until it fit comfortably in everyone else's expectations. I wasn't broke. I was broke adjacent. And I was thriving. The phantom account became my favorite hobby. Every Friday, right after payday, I'd transfer my real income into secret savings and leave just enough in the Decoy account to cover bills and groceries. By Saturday morning, that account looked like the aftermath of a hurricane, $3 in checking, 20 in savings. It was a masterpiece of financial theater. Sometimes I'd open the app and admire the emptiness, like an artist stepping back from a finished painting. "Beautiful," I'd whisper. Tragically beautiful. Whenever someone asked for money, I didn't even have to fake it anymore. One screenshot, one sad sigh, and boom, case closed. I was a broke man with rich peace of mind. It didn't take long before the regulars came sniffing around again. First was my buddy Trevor, who always seemed one unpaid bill away from a personal bankruptcy documentary. "Bro," he said, "I hate to ask, but I'm in a bind." Of course he was. Trevor lived in a permanent bind. If his finances were a movie, it'd be called Fast and the Curious, The Rent is Due. "Wish I could help," I said, opening the Decoy app. "Look, I'm barely hanging on myself." He peered at my screen like he was reading a terminal diagnosis. "Damn, man. I didn't know it was that bad." "Yeah," I said gravely, "tough times." He patted my shoulder. "We're all struggling, huh?" I nodded. "Exactly. For once, we were equals, two broke comrades sharing the same sinking ship." I could have hugged him. After that, word spread faster than free Wi-Fi. "Did you hear? Mark fell on hard times." "Really? That guy used to be loaded." "Yeah, guess karma finally caught up." I wasn't offended. Honestly, it was the most peace I'd had in years. People treated me differently, gently, almost respectfully. They didn't invite me to expensive dinners anymore, which was great because I'd never enjoyed paying for half the table anyway. Instead, I got invitations to backyard cookouts, potlucks, BYOB nights. The cheaper the event, the more I was included. Apparently, being broke made me more relatable. Go figure. The first time someone asked what happened to all my money, I panicked. I couldn't exactly say, "Oh, it's safe in a diversified portfolio earning steady returns. That'd ruin the act. So I shrugged and said the first thing that came to mind. Beer. It was meant as a joke. But they nodded in understanding, like I'd just confessed to a tragic addiction. Yeah, man, said Trevor. That stuff adds up. My cousin lost everything drinking. Lost everything, to beer. I realized then how convenient it was to be mistaken for a cautionary tale. People love believing your downfall mirrors their own choices, it validates them. If I, the once responsible saver, could spiral into beer poverty, then maybe their own overdraft fees weren't so shameful. So I let them believe it. The story grew legs. By year 3, apparently, I was also a gambling addict who'd spent thousands at casinos. At a family barbecue, my Aunt Carol whispered, "You know, we prayed for you after that Atlantic City thing." The what? She patted my hand. It's good you're getting help. Thanks, I said, deciding not to ask further. By Christmas, the rumor evolved again. Now I was a recovering spender who'd nearly lost his house. My cousin Lisa, yes, that Lisa, cornered me with sympathetic eyes. "I just want you to know, cuz, we're proud of you for turning things around." I smiled. Appreciate that. Inside, I was laughing so hard I nearly snorted eggnog through my nose. Here's the thing about pretending to be broke, it's incredibly freeing. Nobody asks you to chip in for group gifts anymore. Nobody expects you to pay for extra drinks since you make more. You can wear the same shirt twice in 1 week and people think, "Oh, poor guy," instead of, "Wow, lazy." And if you don't show up to a fancy dinner, you're not rude, you're responsible. It's like social invisibility, but cozy. I found joy in simple things. Budget meals, quiet weekends, long walks. My fake poverty taught me to enjoy real modesty. I spent less because I wanted to, not because I had to. Maybe I'd lied to protect myself, but somewhere in that lie, I found truth. Of course, even the best schemes meet their match. Mine came in the form of a woman named Claire. We met at a friend's birthday party. She laughed easily, talked about books instead of gossip, and drank her beer slow like it was fine wine. We hit it off instantly. After a few dates, she asked what I did for a living. "I work in IT, I said. "Nice," she smiled. "Good pay, right?" I froze. Enough to survive." "Same here," she said, rolling her eyes. "Half my paycheck disappears to student loans." I relaxed. Another broke comrade, perfect. But as weeks passed, I realized something terrifying. I liked her. Really liked her. And for the first time in years, my fake persona became inconvenient. I couldn't take her to nice places without breaking character. Couldn't buy gifts that looked expensive. Once, I nearly ruined a surprise weekend getaway by insisting we stay at a budget motel because of my finances. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Mark, are you sure you can afford this trip?" "Oh, yeah," I stammered. "I've got coupons." "Coupons? For a cabin rental?" Smooth. It took me 3 months to come clean. We were eating takeout in my apartment when she noticed a stack of unopened mail, one envelope with a brokerage logo. "You invest?" she asked. I froze mid-bite. That's old mail." She smiled. "Mark, you know lying isn't a great foundation for a relationship." That hit harder than I expected. I sighed, put down my chopsticks, and told her everything, from the Bank of Mark days to the phantom account and the fake beer addiction. When I finished, I waited for her to call me insane. Instead, she burst out laughing. "You mean," she said between giggles, "you faked being broke for years just to keep people from asking for money?" "Pretty much." She wiped her eyes. "That's the most ridiculous, brilliant thing I've ever heard." I grinned. "So, you're not running for the hills. Are you kidding? I love it. You're like Batman if Batman's superpower was petty financial boundaries. We spent the rest of the night laughing. For the first time, my secret didn't feel shameful, it felt like a story worth telling. Claire became my confidante, my co-conspirator. Whenever family visited, she'd play along perfectly. Sorry, we're still recovering from that Vegas trip, she'd sigh, rolling her eyes. Sometimes we'd toast to our invisible riches, clinking glasses of cheap wine while checking our real investment balances. It was fun, until it wasn't. Because lies, even funny ones, grow roots. At some point, you forget who knows the truth and who doesn't. You start editing yourself around your own family. Holidays feel like undercover missions. Still, it beat being treated like a walking loan department. So we kept the game going. One evening, my younger brother swung by unannounced. He'd just been in the neighborhood, which was code for, I need something. We chatted for a bit before he finally dropped the act. Listen, man, he said, I'm short on rent this month. I sighed internally. I wish I could help, but money's tight. He looked skeptical. Come on, you've always been good with cash. Not anymore. He squinted. Prove it. Oh, he did not just challenge me to a broke-off. Fine, I said, opening my phone and showing him the Decoy account. $4.82. Happy? He blinked. Damn. Guess I misjudged. Then, before I could stop him, he glanced at an email notification that popped up on my screen. Your Fidelity investment summary is ready. My soul left my body. What's that? He asked. Spam, I said. Scam email. They're everywhere. He nodded slowly, clearly not convinced. Right. Scam. With your name on it. After he left, I changed every notification setting and silently cursed the universe for inventing email previews. The next week, I decided to double down on the broke narrative, just to cover any lingering suspicion. When coworkers invited me to a steakhouse, I shook my head. Can't swing it this month. Tight budget. When my cousin suggested a weekend trip, I said, maybe next year, if the market recovers. What market? He asked. The, job market. Nailed it. But the more I leaned into the role, the more absurd it became. I was living in financial cosplay. Even Claire started teasing me. You know, she said one night, you could write a book called How to Be Broke and Love It. Funny, I said, I already have the chapter titles, Decoy Accounts and the Power of Pretending. We laughed. But somewhere underneath the laughter was a growing sense of fatigue. Keeping the lie alive meant constantly managing it. Then life threw me a curveball, a big promotion. More money, more perks, a shiny new title, Senior Systems Analyst. I was thrilled, until I realized what it meant socially. A raise meant visibility. Visibility meant scrutiny. At work, people congratulated me with that knowing look, he's rich now. At home, I had to pretend nothing changed. Claire thought it was hilarious. So, she said, are we celebrating your fake poverty with slightly nicer fake wine? Exactly. But my family? They weren't going to miss the news. Sure enough, a coworker tagged me in a photo, congrats to Mark for his promotion. By morning, my phone was blowing up. Mom, honey, is this true? That's wonderful. Sister, so you're not broke after all, huh? Cousin Lisa, guess you're buying drinks next time winking face. I could practically feel the loan requests loading like artillery. So I posted a status update to get ahead of it, thanks everyone. Still paying off some old debts, but grateful for the opportunity. That little line, still paying off old debts, worked like magic. Everyone backed off, assuming I was buried in financial fallout from my supposed wild years. Sometimes, I even impressed myself. That October, Claire and I hosted a Halloween party. We went all out, decorations, snacks, themed cocktails. My sister showed up dressed as a vampire, which felt appropriate given her history of draining me financially. She walked around the house, eyes narrowing at the decor. "Wow," she said. "For someone who's always broke, this place looks nice." "Thrift stores," I replied smoothly. Claire snorted from the kitchen. "Oh yeah, those thrift stores have really stepped up." My sister raised an eyebrow. "What's so funny?" "Nothing," Claire said quickly, but she was grinning. I didn't think much of it then. But that little grin would come back to haunt me. By late 2010s, my life had settled into a weird equilibrium. I was married, comfortable, respected, and, ironically, still broke in half my family's eyes. But I didn't mind. The lie had evolved from shield to inside joke, something Claire and I laughed about when bills came due or when someone dropped a new rumor. I thought I'd mastered the art of financial invisibility. Then, one crisp Halloween evening, it all came crashing down, one laugh, one spilled secret, one, "Wait, what?" that changed everything. If you've ever told a lie that got a little out of hand, you'll understand what came next. My broke guy act started small, just a little white lie to protect my savings, but by the time my sister's Halloween smirk rolled around, it had grown legs, arms, and a Netflix series deal. People didn't just believe I was broke, they theorized about how I got that way. Whole family branches had their own headcanons. One side said I gambled it all away. Another swore I was in rehab for beer problems. And somewhere along the way, strippers got involved. Apparently, I'd lived a far more exciting life than I actually had. It started innocently enough. I was at my cousin's barbecue when Uncle Gene, who had the tact of a foghorn, slapped me on the back and said, "So, you stayin' out of those casinos, huh?" "What?" He grinned. "Your mom said you had a wild streak for a while there. Guess we all have our demons." I blinked. "Right, yeah. Trying to stay on the straight and narrow." He nodded solemnly. "Proud of you, son." I walked away wondering how the beer story had mutated into a full-blown gambling arc somewhere between Christmas and now. I'd apparently become a cautionary tale with a redemption subplot. The family rumor mill had better writers than I did. 2 weeks later, Claire got a text from her cousin, who worked at a salon my sister frequented. "Hey, just heard the funniest thing. People think Mark lost his savings at strip clubs. Is that true?" Claire read it aloud while I was cooking dinner. I nearly dropped the spatula. "Strip clubs?" She burst out laughing. "Well, that explains the mysterious beer and women line you gave Aunt Carol last Thanksgiving." "Yeah, but how does that become strip clubs?" "You underestimate your family's imagination," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Honestly, I'm kind of impressed." I sighed. "Great. Now I'm the Wolf of Wall Street, minus the yacht." Most people would try to correct the rumors. Not me. I'd built my fake broke persona on one sacred rule: never clarify a good misunderstanding. The more ridiculous the stories became, the safer I was. Nobody asks to borrow money from the guy who supposedly blew his life savings on beer, blackjack, and lap dances. So when my brother asked, "Dude, what really happened?" I just smiled and said, "Let's just say it was a wild couple of years." He nodded gravely, as if I'd confessed to surviving some moral hurricane. "Respect, man," he said. "At least you're honest about your past." Oh, the irony. The rumors didn't stay confined to family. Somehow, they leaked into my workplace. It started when Trevor, yes, still my coworker, cornered me in the break room. "Hey man, I heard you used to party hard back in the day." "True. Depends on your definition of party," I said carefully. He laughed. "Word is you blew through a fortune before you got your act together." "A fortune. Incredible. I hadn't realized my modest savings account had reached mythic status. Yup, I said, deadpan. Gone. Poof. Trevor slapped my shoulder. Well, respect. You seem grounded now. You're like one of those finance guru guys who lost everything and then wrote a book. I nearly choked on my coffee. Working title, I said, How to Lose Money Without Actually Losing Money. A few weeks later, HR asked if I'd give a short, financial wellness talk during a company lunch. Apparently, my reputation as a reformed spender had inspired them. Mark, said my manager, you've really turned your life around. You'd be perfect to motivate others. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded politely and spent the next 2 days crafting a presentation titled Lessons from the Wallet. It was pure fiction, of course. I invented stories about reckless years and hard lessons learned. I even added bullet points like don't ignore your savings goals, no matter how fun the casino lights look. The audience loved it. I got applause. People called me brave for sharing. Afterward, Trevor patted my back again. Man, I didn't know you'd been through all that. Neither did I. Claire thought the whole thing was comedy gold. You realize, she said one night, you're living in your own mockumentary. I know, I groaned. I'm basically the Forrest Gump of financial rumors. She grinned. At least you're famous for something. Yeah. Poor fame. She leaned in, kissed me, and whispered, you're rich where it counts. Corny. Absolutely. But in that moment, I realized how much I loved her. She'd seen me at my most ridiculous and still thought I was worth keeping. If that's not wealth, I don't know what is. Unfortunately, not everyone was deterred by my reputation. Some folks are so shameless they'll borrow from the guy rumored to have lost it all. My old college buddy Dave reappeared after a decade, texting me out of nowhere, yo, bro, long time. You still got connections? Need a small loan till Friday. I stared at my phone like it had personally insulted me. Connections? Claire asked. Yeah, I said, apparently to a magic money fountain that doesn't exist. I texted back, sorry, man. Still recovering financially. Beer's expensive. He replied with a thumbs up emoji and vanished like a bad investment. Then came the curveball I didn't see coming. My mom decided to stage an intervention. One Sunday, she called and said, sweetheart, come over for dinner. We need to talk. I arrived expecting lasagna. Instead, I walked into a living room filled with family, mom, dad, my sister, Aunt Carol, even Uncle Gene. They looked at me like I'd been caught embezzling. Mom clasped her hands. Honey, we love you, but this lifestyle has to stop. What lifestyle? She gestured vaguely. The drinking, the women, the casinos. I blinked. What? Mark, my dad said sternly, we've all made mistakes, but this pattern of self-destruction isn't you. I looked at Claire, who was trying not to burst into laughter. Guys, I said slowly, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. My sister crossed her arms. So you didn't lose your savings? Well, not exactly. Not exactly. I mean, I never really had a problem. I just told people I did, to stop them from asking for money. Silence. Then, chaos. Mom gasped. Aunt Carol clutched her pearls. My sister looked like I'd confessed to being a secret agent. You mean you lied to us? She said. Technically, I replied, I told a story that protected my financial boundaries. You deceived the family. I sighed. Yeah, but consider this, no one's borrowed money from me in years. That's progress. They did not see it that way. For the next 30 minutes, I was scolded like a naughty child. How could I betray family trust? How could I let them believe the worst? Meanwhile, Claire sat quietly on the couch, biting her lip to keep from laughing. Finally, my sister said, "You owe us an apology." "For what?" "For lying." "I didn't lie," I said. "I improvised the truth." They groaned in unison. Mom shook her head. "You need to make this right." So I did what any reasonable man would do, I brought dessert. Cheesecake covers many sins. By the time we'd finished eating, tensions had cooled. Even Aunt Carol admitted it was, kind of clever. Still, my sister wasn't letting it go. "You're unbelievable," she muttered. "Who fakes being broke?" "Apparently," I said, "me." Successfully. Unfortunately, my sister had the discretion of a gossip columnist on caffeine. Within a week, everyone knew. Cousins, co-workers, even my barber. Suddenly, I wasn't the tragic ex-spender anymore, I was the tightwad genius who tricked everyone. People reacted in two ways: half thought it was hilarious and started calling me the accountant. The other half decided I was a cold-hearted miser. Uncle Gene said, "Man, that's just wrong." Cousin Lisa said, "I wish I'd thought of it." Claire said, "You've officially become a folk hero." Not everyone took it in stride. One night, my brother called, furious. "So you've been swimming in cash while pretending to be broke?" I wasn't swimming, more like wading responsibly. He huffed. "You could have helped me out back then." "Helped you do what?" "Avoid budgeting." He hung up. For a moment, guilt crept in. Maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe pretending to be broke had cost me more than a few awkward conversations, it had cost me trust. Claire found me brooding on the couch. "Feeling bad?" she asked. "A little. Maybe I should have been honest sooner." She nodded. "Maybe. But let's be real, if you'd told them the truth, they'd still be borrowing." She was right. I knew she was right. But redemption, it turns out, doesn't feel like victory. It feels like cleanup duty after a parade. In the weeks that followed, something interesting happened. The people who thought I was selfish, stopped calling. And the ones who thought I was clever, they stuck around. Our relationships changed. They didn't expect money, just conversation. My friendships became simpler, based on jokes, not loans. Even my sister eventually thawed. She called one evening and said, "You know, it's messed up, but kind of genius." "Thanks, I think. I still think you're an ass, though." "Fair." We laughed. For the first time in years, the laughter didn't have strings attached. By Christmas, the whole saga had become family legend. My cousins turned it into a running joke. At dinner, Uncle Gene stood up and raised his glass. To Mark, the only man who can say, "I'm broke," and make money doing it. Laughter filled the room. Even Mom smiled. I raised my glass back. To boundaries, and believable lies. Aunt Carol chimed in. And to honesty, someday. We all cracked up. That night, I realized the story had transformed from scandal to folklore. I wasn't the villain anymore, I was the punchline everyone actually liked. After the dishes were cleared and everyone had gone home, I sat by the tree with Claire. "You know," I said, "for all the chaos it caused, that lie saved my sanity." She nodded. "And it taught you how to say no." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Turns out fake poverty is great training for real boundaries." She rested her head on my shoulder. "You think they'll ever stop teasing you?" "Nope," I said. "But that's fine. Beats being broke and annoyed." We clinked our glasses of cheap champagne, by choice, not necessity, and laughed into the glow of the Christmas lights. Months later, I got an email from a local podcast: "We'd love to have you on as a guest to talk about financial self-defense and setting boundaries with family." Apparently, someone had shared my story online. Claire laughed so hard she nearly fell off the couch. You're going to be a guru now. Hey, I said, if I can help others fake being broke responsibly, maybe it's all worth it. She wiped a tear. You're ridiculous. Ridiculously solvent, I corrected. And we both cracked up, because that was the truest thing I'd said in years. By the time the dust settled from my family's collective meltdown, Claire and I were officially married. No dramatic proposal, no fireworks, just two people who'd already spent years laughing at life's absurdities deciding to make the laughter legally binding. We said our vows in a small courthouse, followed by a dinner with 10 people, half of whom thought I was either bankrupt or the devil incarnate. My sister clinked her glass during the toast and said, "Here's to the richest poor man I know." Everyone laughed. I bowed. Because when life hands you irony, you might as well lean into it. Our first year of marriage was a comedy sketch about two people who pretended to be broke even though they weren't. We kept separate accounts, not because of mistrust, but because I had a system, and my system required plausible deniability. The phantom account lived on, like a ghost we fed just enough to keep it haunting. Claire was the perfect partner in crime. When someone asked why we weren't buying a bigger house, she'd sigh dramatically and say, "We're still rebuilding after everything." The word everything did all the heavy lifting. It could mean gambling, beer, a stock market crash, or aliens. No one ever asked for clarification. We didn't register anywhere, but people insisted on giving us money, cards stuffed with checks, envelopes with crisp bills. For the honeymoon, they said. We thanked them sincerely, cashed every check, and put it straight into savings. Then, when relatives followed up later, "How was the honeymoon?" I smiled and said, "Memorable." Which was technically true. We stayed home, grilled burgers, and watched Jeopardy! While eating ice cream straight from the carton. Claire called it the stay-at-home investment strategy. Cost, $14.78, return, peace, quiet, and no awkward tan lines. People talk about emotional intimacy in marriage, but no one warns you about financial intimacy. You think you know each other until the tax forms come out. Claire's honesty forced me to face something uncomfortable. I wasn't just hiding money from freeloaders, I was still hiding from myself. One night she caught me moving money between accounts like I was laundering it. "Sweetheart," she said, "who are you hiding from? Your mother or the FBI?" "Both," I said. "It's safer this way." She laughed, but then she got serious. "Mark, at some point, the act has to end. You don't owe explanations to anyone but me. But if we're going to build something together, I can't be married to a man who's constantly pretending." That hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right, I wasn't lying anymore to protect my savings. I was lying out of habit. We sat down that weekend for what Claire called the Great Budget Summit. She brought out spreadsheets. I brought snacks. "Here's the thing," she said, highlighting cells like a financial surgeon, "we have enough. We're fine. We could take a trip, renovate, invest more aggressively, anything we actually want." I nodded. "But if we start acting like we have money, they'll come crawling again." She smirked. "Who's they?" "The borrowers' union." "Exactly. You open the vault once, and they never leave." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then maybe it's time to teach them something better than no. Maybe it's time to teach them boundaries." I frowned. Boundaries don't work on my family. They hear the word no like dogs hear thunder, panic, denial, immediate retaliation. "Then we make new rules," she said. "Together." And we did. Rule number 1, transparency between us, no secrets, no decoy accounts, at least not between the two of us. We kept the phantom account for show, but Claire had access to everything. She even nicknamed the hidden savings Operation Freedom Fund. Freedom from what? I asked. "From guilt," she said. "You spent your 20s buying everyone else's peace of mind. This is your reward." Rule number 2, no more guilt loans. We wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it to the fridge. No, is a complete sentence. Every time a relative hinted for cash, Claire would point at the note. Policy says no. My mom eventually stopped asking. My brother stopped pretending rent day was a surprise. Even Lisa, the eternal cousin, stopped sending funny memes that conveniently ended with, BTW, can you spot me $100? The silence was golden. We learned to enjoy our comfort without broadcasting it. Vacations? Off-season, low-key, no Instagram posts. Nice dinners. Wednesday nights, quiet corners, no tags. Bonuses? Straight into the Freedom Fund. It wasn't secrecy, it was serenity. And it made our marriage stronger, because every decision felt like a shared joke that only we were in on. 1 year later, Claire convinced me to see a financial therapist. It's not about numbers, she said. It's about mindset. I rolled my eyes but went anyway. The therapist, a cheerful woman with too many throw pillows, asked me to describe my relationship with money. I told her the truth, it's complicated. We're in a committed relationship, but my family keeps trying to make it open. She laughed, then leaned forward. Mark, what you did was clever, but it sounds like you've been managing fear, not money. Fear? Yes. You don't trust people not to use you, so you built an entire identity around protecting yourself. I sat back. So what, I'm emotionally frugal. She smiled. Exactly. And maybe it's time to invest in trust again. That sentence stuck with me for weeks. Around that same time, my younger cousin Eddie, one of the few relatives I still liked, called me out of the blue. Hey, Mark, he said nervously, I've been trying to start a small landscaping business, but the bank turned me down. I'm not asking for a loan, I just need advice. Advice. Not money. That was new. We met for coffee. I showed him how to draft a simple budget, pitch to clients, and set aside taxes. It felt good, like all the years of protecting myself were finally paying forward. When he shook my hand afterward, he said, "Thanks, man. You always seem to have your act together." I smiled. You have no idea. A few months later, Eddie called again, not for help, but to tell me his business had landed its first big contract. He said, I'm buying Mom a new washing machine. She's been using that broken one for years. I hung up and told Claire. See, she said. That's what trust looks like. You helped someone without losing anything. She was right again. And for the first time, saying yes didn't feel like weakness. For our second anniversary, Claire planned a surprise weekend getaway. When we arrived, I realized she'd booked a fancy cabin, the same one I'd once lied about using coupons for. Remember this place? She said, grinning. How could I forget? She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me a small box. Inside was a keychain engraved with the words, "Rich in the right ways." I swallowed hard. You're good at this redemption thing, you know that. She smiled. Somebody has to be. We spent the evening on the porch, watching the fireflies blink like Morse code for it's okay to be happy. It took a while, but the family drama eventually cooled. My mom started bragging again, this time about how Mark finally learned to say no. My sister softened too. One day she called just to chat, no hidden agenda. You know, she said, for all your nonsense, you kind of taught us something. Yeah. Yeah. Turns out, when you stop giving everyone money, they figure out how to make their own. Glad I could help, I said. She laughed. Still a smartass, huh? Genetically. It felt peaceful. For the first time, money wasn't the uninvited guest at every family gathering. Then came the day that finally turned everything around. Claire and I were at a fundraiser for a local food pantry, one she volunteered for. During the auction, the organizer mentioned they were short on funds for new refrigeration equipment. Without thinking, I raised my hand. "I'll cover it." The room turned. Claire's jaw dropped. "Mark," she whispered, "that's a few $1,000s. "I know," I said, smiling. "It's time to make a different kind of investment." We wrote the check that night, not for recognition, but for redemption. It felt like shedding an old skin. Afterward, the organizer pulled me aside. "Thank you. Most people talk about giving back. You just did it." I didn't know how to respond. For once, I wasn't pretending to be broke or playing financial chess. I was just me. News of the donation spread, because of course it did, but instead of resurrecting old rumors, it started something new. People began reaching out not for handouts, but for guidance. "Hey, how'd you get your finances so stable? What's your trick?" I'd smile and say, "Don't pretend to be broke forever. Just long enough to learn why you're doing it." A few weeks later, Mom called me over for dinner again. This time, the vibe was different, no intervention circle, no judgment. Just roast chicken and quiet pride. "You've changed," she said. "I hope so. I used to worry you were bitter. Now you just seem peaceful." I nodded. "Guess I learned that protecting your money doesn't mean building walls. It means building wisdom." She smiled. "That's something your father could have used." We laughed. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, son." I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until that moment. Life didn't transform overnight. Bills still existed, the car still needed repairs, and my brother still texted memes about financial trauma. But everything felt lighter. Claire and I started a small tradition. Every month, we'd do one generous thing: anonymous donations, surprise groceries for a neighbor, a giant tip for an overworked server. Balance, she called it. A little giving for all that guarding. And it worked. A year later, I ran into Dave, yes, that Dave, the original borrower, my college roommate. He looked older, worn down. We grabbed coffee, swapped stories. He admitted he'd made bad financial choices. Then he said, "You were smart, man. You always saved. Wish I'd learned that from you." For the first time, I told him the full story, the phantom account, the fake broke act, all of it. He stared at me, then started laughing. "You're insane." "Probably. You know," he said, "that's kind of genius. I'm stealing that idea, except without the lying part." "Good plan," I said, raising my cup. And just like that, 20 years of awkward guilt evaporated. These days, people still joke about me being the tightwad philosopher. I let them. Because I know the truth, wealth isn't about what you hoard, it's about what you no longer fear losing. Claire calls it my monk era. I call it finally growing up. Sometimes, when we check our accounts and see the Freedom Fund growing, she'll nudge me and say, "You sure you're not still hiding from someone?" And I'll grin. Only for my sister's next family reunion. A few months after our 5th anniversary, I found a letter in the mail. It was from Eddie, the cousin I'd helped start his landscaping business. Inside was a photo of his new truck and a handwritten note: "Hey Mark, thought you'd like to know, we're expanding. Hired 3 employees. None of this would have happened if you hadn't taught me how to stand on my own 2 feet. Thanks for believing in me, even when you pretended to be broke." I laughed out loud reading that last line. Claire framed it and hung it in the hallway. Every time I walk past, I read it again and think, maybe redemption doesn't come from telling the truth. Maybe it comes from finally living it. If you've never seen your entire reputation collapse in a single laugh, let me tell you, it's both horrifying and oddly freeing. Mine happened on Halloween night, of course. Because if you're going to unmask yourself, it might as well be during a holiday built for masks. By 2019, Claire and I had achieved what I like to call sustainable sanity. The family had stopped asking for money. Work was steady. The broke guy act had faded into legend, like a local myth people still chuckled about but no longer questioned. We were throwing our annual Halloween party, something of a neighborhood tradition. Claire loved hosting, fog machines, cheesy playlists, themed cocktails. I just liked that I could hide behind a costume all night and eat miniature Snickers without judgment. This year's theme was retro rebellion. I went as a 1980s rock star, leather jacket, fake mullet, sunglasses at night. Claire went as a disco queen, sequins and all. We looked like two time travelers who got lost on the way to a karaoke contest. By 8 o'clock, the house was full. Our friends from work mingled with cousins, neighbors, and, inevitably, my sister. She arrived dressed as a witch, which I chose to interpret as performance art rather than symbolism. She brought pumpkin cupcakes, a fake broom, and her trademark ability to sniff out secrets. I should have known right then that the night wouldn't end quietly. The party was loud enough that you could confess to tax evasion and nobody would notice. That's why I didn't realize Claire and my sister were talking in the kitchen until I heard laughter, loud, contagious laughter that cut through the music. When I peeked around the corner, I saw Claire doubled over, holding a glass of wine, and my sister standing frozen, eyebrows raised so high they could have touched the ceiling. "What's so funny?" I asked, still half dancing to disguise my panic. Claire turned, giggling. "Oh, honey, your sister didn't know about the phantom account." My heart stopped. "You told her?" I said. "She asked why you always say you're broke when you clearly aren't," Claire said, trying to compose herself. So I explained the system. I thought she knew. My sister blinked. "Wait, you faked being broke?" "For years." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I caught a faint smell of caramel popcorn, fog juice, and impending doom. You know how in movies a record scratch stops the music? Well, this was the real-life version. Someone must have turned down the stereo because suddenly the kitchen was dead quiet. And my sister, bless her dramatic soul, wasn't whispering. "You mean the strip club thing was a lie?" Every head turned. My coworker Trevor froze mid-bite of a hot dog. Aunt Carol, who'd just walked in, gasped audibly. Even the fog machine seemed to pause, as if waiting for my answer. I forced a laugh. "Surprise. It's all been performance art. You've been part of an immersive theater experience called Leave Mark Alone. Tickets are free but non-refundable." Nobody laughed. I pulled my sister into the hallway. "Okay, before you blow a gasket, can we maybe not ruin the party?" "Mark," she hissed. "You lied to everyone. For decades. Technically years, not decades. And technically I didn't lie, I curated a narrative." "Curated a narrative?" "You made Mom cry. She thought you were addicted to beer." I groaned. I didn't tell her that. She just filled in the blanks. "Well, guess what," she snapped, "I'm filling in the blanks for everyone else." And just like that, she stormed back into the kitchen. I followed, silently begging the universe for a conveniently timed earthquake. My sister clinked her glass with a spoon. "Everyone, gather round. Apparently, my financially responsible brother here has a confession." "Please don't," I said under my breath. But she did. Oh, she absolutely did. She recapped the entire saga, my fake poverty, the Decoy account, the legendary beer and strippers myth. She even did impressions. By the time she finished, the room was silent except for someone crunching a tortilla chip in slow motion. Then Aunt Carol whispered, "So, no rehab?" "No rehab," I said. "And no casino debt?" "No casino debt." "And no strippers?" I hesitated. "Well, none that charged admission." Claire snorted so loudly she nearly spilled her drink. That broke the tension. Laughter spread through the room, hesitant at first, then contagious. Even my sister cracked a smile. Only you, she said, shaking her head. Only you would fake bankruptcy to avoid lending $50. Once the guests were gone and the last candy wrappers were swept up, I sat on the couch next to Claire, surrounded by fake cobwebs and the faint scent of pumpkin beer. Well, she said, on the bright side, you don't have to hide anymore. On the dim side, I said, half my family now thinks I'm a sociopath. She laughed. Nah. They think you're clever. And maybe a little crazy. Both are true. I leaned back, exhausted. It's weird. I thought keeping the secret gave me control. But now that it's out, I actually feel lighter. Claire nodded. Secrets are like credit cards. Handy at first, but the interest will eat you alive. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Mom, so, no beer problem. Dad, well played. Cousin Lisa, I'm still mad I didn't think of it first. Trevor, dude face with tears of joy, you're a legend. There were two types of responses, admiration and indignation. But what surprised me most was how many people wrote to say they understood. One coworker texted, "Man, I started saying I'm broke just to get out of group trips. You inspired me." Another cousin said, "You taught us boundaries by example." Messed up example, but still. It turns out, half the world wants permission to say no. I'd just given them a blueprint, a very stupid blueprint, but a blueprint nonetheless. A week later, my mom invited us over for a conversation. I was starting to think conversation was code for mild emotional ambush. When we arrived, the usual suspects were there: Mom, Dad, my sister, Aunt Carol, and the ever-judgmental family cat. Mom served tea, sat down, and took a deep breath. "Mark," she said gently, "we understand why you did what you did. But you hurt some feelings." "I know," I said. "And I really am sorry. I was tired of being the family ATM. I should have set boundaries without playing pretend." My dad nodded. "Boundaries are good. Lying is bad. Next time, just say no." Noted. My sister crossed her arms. "So you're done with the Decoy account?" I grinned. "Let's call it semi-retired." Even Mom laughed at that. Then Aunt Carol leaned forward. "Well, if you ever write a book about this, I want a cut." I raised my cup. "Deal. 15% interest, compounded monthly." Laughter again. Real this time. Forgiving. A few days later, something even stranger happened. People started apologizing to me. Cousin Lisa called and said, "You know, I never realized how unfair we were. We took advantage of you." "Thanks, Lisa," I said. Apology accepted. Interest waived. Trevor sent a text, "Hey man, I paid off my credit cards. Guess you rubbed off on me." Even my brother showed up with a six-pack and said, "You're still a jerk, but a jerk with boundaries." Respect. That was the closest thing to, "I love you," my family has ever said. After all the noise died down, I realized something important. I'd spent years pretending to be poor because I was afraid of disappointing people. But disappointment isn't the worst thing in the world, resentment is. And I'd been carrying that quiet resentment like a tax I never filed. When the truth finally came out, it was messy, yes, but also cleansing. Like declaring bankruptcy on emotional debt. Claire said it best later that week, "Sometimes you have to let the wrong version of yourself die so the real one can start earning interest." I told her that was too good for me not to steal. She said, "Fine, just cite your sources." We started hosting family dinners again. Smaller, simpler, less drama. Everyone brought a dish, and no one brought a sob story. It felt like we'd all grown up a little together. Mom even joked one night, "You know, if you'd told us you wanted to stop lending money, we would have understood." I raised an eyebrow. Really? She smiled. Well, eventually. Fair enough. A month after the reveal, that same local podcast invited me back, this time to talk about honesty and family dynamics. The episode was called The Bank of Boundaries. I told the whole story, minus a few names, and ended with this line: sometimes you have to pretend to be broke to learn what actually makes you rich. It went semi-viral. People started emailing me their own stories of fake poverty, emotional exhaustion, and eventual freedom. I never expected to be a spokesman for financial self-respect, but hey, life has a sense of humor. The following Halloween, we threw another party. This time I wore a costume that was a little too on the nose, a bank teller with a "closed for maintenance" sign around my neck. My sister arrived as a devil with a calculator. She handed me a plastic coin bank shaped like a pig. On its side she'd written in marker, "Emergency Fund, for when Mark finally cracks." We laughed until we cried. Later that night, as the guests left and the house grew quiet, I stood by the window watching the jack-o'-lanterns flicker. For years, I'd hidden behind a lie to protect my peace. Now, the truth was out, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it was better. I turned to Claire. "So what do you think I should be for Halloween next year?" She smiled. "How about yourself?" And for once, that sounded like the best costume of all. There's a strange peace that settles in after a long-running life finally dies. It's quiet, not the awkward kind, but the kind that feels like a sigh you've been holding for 10 years. That's what life felt like after the Halloween incident. No more fake balances. No more double-checking my banking app before showing it to someone. No more elaborate backstories involving beer, casinos, or strippers. Just me, Claire, and the truth, messy, human, and finally affordable. It's funny how quickly people move on once there's no drama left to chew on. 2 months after the reveal, the family group chat had already gone back to memes, recipes, and pictures of pets in Christmas sweaters. At work, my "broke guy" legend faded into company folklore. The younger employees whispered about that one dude who fooled everybody like I was a ghost haunting the HR policies. Trevor still calls me Bank Mark. He says it like a badge of honor now. "Hey, Bank Mark," he'll yell across the break room, "you got any hot tips for faking insolvency?" I always answer, "Sure, marry up and keep a Decoy account." People laugh. But then they ask real questions about budgeting, savings, retirement. And that's how I became an accidental mentor, the financial Yoda nobody asked for. While I was busy basking in post-scandal serenity, Claire decided to channel the whole thing into something useful. She started a YouTube series called Money Myths and Marriage. Episode 1 was titled, "My Husband Faked Being Broke for a Decade, Here's What We Learned." I nearly spit out my coffee when I saw the thumbnail. "Claire," I said, "you used our wedding photo for clickbait." She grinned. "It's called brand recognition, sweetheart." The video went mildly viral. Apparently, people love a story about financial deception that ends in marital bliss. The comments were wild, "This is the most wholesome scam I've ever heard. Protect your peace like Mark did. My boyfriend just opened a phantom account. Thanks." Claire looked at me one night and said, "You realize you're an influencer now, right?" I groaned. Do influencers get discounts on guilt? Early the next year, I got a handwritten letter from someone I hadn't heard from in over 20 years, Dave, my old college roommate, the one who borrowed $100 for a tow truck and never paid it back. It said, "Hey Mark, I heard your story from a mutual friend. Guess you finally found a way to get me to stop asking for money. Well played. I wanted to send this with a little interest. Enclosed is $120. Keep the change. Consider it my late payment and your early Christmas gift." Inside was a crisp 120. I showed it to Claire. She laughed so hard she snorted. That might be the highest ROI on a friendship I've ever seen. Then came the email that changed everything, an invitation to speak at a local business conference. The subject line read, Keynote Proposal, Financial Boundaries for Real People. They'd heard me on the podcast. They wanted me to talk about how to set limits with friends and family without feeling like a jerk. I nearly deleted it. I wasn't a motivational speaker, I was a recovering people pleaser with a decent spreadsheet habit. But Claire insisted. You've spent half your life learning this lesson, she said. Go share it. Besides, you owe the universe a refund. So I did. Standing on that stage in front of 200 people felt surreal. I opened with the truth, Hi, I'm Mark, and for 10 years I pretended to be broke so my friends would stop borrowing money. Laughter erupted. Instant rapport. I talked about the fear of saying no, the pressure to rescue people, and the beauty of boundaries. I even threw in a slide of my Decoy bank balance, $4.27, and called it my most successful acting credit. When it was over, people lined up to thank me. One woman said, You just saved me a loan I couldn't afford. That night, I realized something I never had before, maybe the whole mess had a purpose. After the talk, Claire and I decided to put our Freedom Fund to use. We didn't need it as a shield anymore, so we turned it into something better, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in our town. We called it the No Strings Fund. Each year, we pick 2 students and cover their first semester books and fees, no loans, no repayment, just trust. When we told my family, Mom teared up. Dad said, Well, guess all those years of being stingy paid off. Frugal, I corrected. Frugal with a side of strategy. My sister and I took longer to fully mend, but time has a way of turning resentment into material for jokes. One day she called out of the blue. Hey, Mark, she said, remember when I blew your cover on Halloween? How could I forget? My emotional credit score still has a dent. She laughed. Well, you'll be happy to know I used your tactics. Opened my own phantom account. I choked. You did what? Relax. Not for lying. Just for saving. Turns out, fake broke energy helps me avoid spending real money. I had to admit, that was pretty good. Guess the family curse is officially reversed, I said. Guess so, she replied. Then, after a pause, I'm proud of you, brother. Even if you are an idiot. That's how we say, I love you, in our family, through light insults and financial tips. Every summer, my family throws a big barbecue. The old me used to dread it, the questions, the requests, the subtle hints. This time, I walked in with nothing but a cooler of beer and a smile. Uncle Gene was flipping burgers. He handed me a plate. So, Bank Mark, he said, you still got that secret account? Which one? I grinned. He laughed. You kill me. Nah, for real, you did good, kid. Took guts to say no when everyone was looking for a handout. Thanks, Uncle G. He pointed at the grill. Now go get me a beer. I'm broke. Touché. One night, long after the barbecue smoke had faded and the house was quiet, Claire and I sat on the porch with 2 cups of tea. The air was cool, the streets silent except for crickets. She looked at me and said, You ever think about how different things would be if you just told people no from the start? All the time, I said. But then I wouldn't have learned how fun lying creatively can be. She laughed. Seriously? Yeah, I said softly. I think about it a lot. But maybe I needed to learn it the hard way, so I could teach it the funny way. She squeezed my hand. And look at you now. You've turned your mess into a message. Does that mean I get to write a book about it? Sure, she said. Just don't name it 50 Shades of Broke. Okay, so I did write a book. Not a big one, more like a collection of essays and stories about boundaries, family, and the weird things people do to protect themselves. I called it The Richest Poor Man Alive. It sold just enough copies to cover editing costs and one nice dinner. But the emails I got from readers were worth more than royalties. One woman wrote, "My parents used me like an ATM for years. After reading your story, I finally said no. I feel free." Another said, "Your wife is a saint. Can't argue with that one." A few months after the book came out, Mom and Dad invited us over again, this time for no reason at all. Dad was in the garage, tinkering with his old radio. He handed me a beer and said, "You know, kid, I used to think money was the measure of a man. Now I think it's how he handles it, and you handled yours pretty well." "Thanks, Dad." He smirked. "Still not lending you any, though. Wouldn't dream of it." Inside, Mom was showing Claire photo albums. Old pictures of me in college, smiling like a guy who had no idea what a 401k was. "Look at that face," she said. "So earnest. So trusting." Claire laughed. "Still is." Mom hugged me before we left. "I'm glad you found balance, sweetheart." Driving home, I realized she was right. Balance wasn't about money at all, it was about peace. A few weeks later, I closed the Phantom account. I'd kept it open all those years out of habit, $20 sitting there like a security blanket. The bank teller asked, "Any particular reason for closing today?" I smiled. "Yeah. I finally grew up." She nodded politely, probably assuming I was going through a divorce or midlife crisis. But as I walked out into the sunlight, I felt something click into place, a chapter ending, cleanly and without regret. That Christmas, Eddie, my entrepreneur cousin, hosted dinner. He'd made it big. Multiple contracts, new equipment, employees. When we arrived, he handed me a gift bag. Inside was a small silver plaque that read, "In honor of Mark, the original investor in self-respect." I laughed until I cried. Claire teared up too. That's when it hit me, the circle was complete. The people who once saw me as their ATM now saw me as their example. So here's the moral, in case you ever find yourself tempted to open a Phantom account of your own, protecting your peace isn't selfish. But lying about it is exhausting. Tell the truth, just set it to a firm interest rate. Say no when you mean no. Say yes when it feels right. And never confuse generosity with obligation. Money, it turns out, is a mirror. It reflects who you are when no one's watching. For years, I thought I was protecting my wallet. Really, I was protecting my self-respect. The difference between the two? One earns interest, the other is interest. A few nights ago, Claire and I walked downtown for dinner. Nothing fancy, just burgers, laughter, and the kind of comfort that comes from knowing you don't owe anyone anything but kindness. As we passed a busker on the sidewalk, I dropped a 20 into his guitar case. Claire nudged me. "You realize that's the last 20 from your Phantom account?" I smiled. "Perfect. Full circle." He looked up, strumming a final chord. "Thanks, man. You just made my night." I almost told him the story, how that single $20 bill had once been the seed of a whole fake identity, but I didn't. Some truths are better left private, like a joke only you and life are in on. When we got home, Claire curled up beside me and said, "So, richest poor man alive, what's next?" I thought about it for a long moment. "Nothing," I said finally. "I think I'm good right here." She smiled. "That's how you know you're rich." If I had to summarize the last 3 decades of my life, I'd write it like a ledger: debits, 1 Decoy bank account. Several angry relatives. A lifetime supply of awkward Thanksgiving conversations. Credits, peace of mind. Boundaries. A marriage built on laughter and trust. Net worth, immeasurable. I don't keep Phantom accounts anymore. I don't need them. The people who love me don't measure my worth in dollars, and the ones who once did? Well, they learn to balance their own books. Sometimes, at family dinners, my sister will raise a glass and say, "To Mark, proof that being broke can pay off." Everyone laughs. And I do too, because it did. I used to think being broke meant having nothing left. Now I know it means having nothing left to prove. And that, my friends, is the richest feeling in the world.